The night my mother introduced me to her perfect choice, for the third time that year, I realized something simple about family. Sometimes the people who love you the most are the ones who understand you the least. My name's Daniel, 32, structural engineer, and I'd been single for almost 2 years. Not because I was picky, not because I was broken. I just walked away from a relationship where I spent more time explaining myself than being myself. My ex used to say, I thought too much before feeling anything. Maybe she was right. Since then, my family had turned my love life into a group project. Everyone had opinions. Nobody asked mine. I wasn't bitter about it anymore, just quietly done arguing. That Sunday dinner started like all the others. Too much food, too many relatives, and my mother's not-so-subtle seating arrangement, placing me directly across from Melissa, daughter of her book club friend. Melissa was fine, pretty, polished, said all the right things about her marketing job and her Pilates schedule, and a trip to Portugal she was still processing emotionally. My mother kept glancing between us like she was watching a movie she'd already decided the ending to, waiting for us to catch up to her script. The dining room had that warm, slightly too bright light my mother always insisted on, the kind that made every awkward silence more visible, like the room itself was in on the performance. My Aunt Rosa was refilling wine glasses like she was trying to loosen tongues on purpose, moving around the table with the practiced ease of someone who'd hosted 100 dinners exactly like this one. My Uncle Marcus was already 3 stories deep into his golf handicap, and in the corner near the kitchen doorway, helping my grandmother cut her chicken because her hands shook too much these days, was Priya. Priya wasn't part of the setup. She was my cousin Elena's friend from nursing school, invited almost as an afterthought when Elena couldn't find a ride, sitting quietly at the far end of the table with a paper plate instead of the good china, like she already knew she wasn't the guest of honor tonight. She wasn't dressed to impress anyone. Scrubs top swapped for a plain sweater, hair still pulled back the way it probably had been all shift, like she'd come straight from work and hadn't bothered pretending otherwise. There was a stillness to her, not shy, not awkward, just unbothered by a room clearly not built with her in mind. She laughed at something my grandmother whispered, easy and unguarded, completely unaware she was being watched. I noticed her before I noticed she was even part of the evening. So Melissa, my uncle said loudly, gesturing with his fork like he was conducting an orchestra, Danny here needs someone who can keep up with him, someone ambitious, someone going places. He said it like a toast, glass raised, eyes flicking toward Priya for half a second, like he was making sure the comparison landed exactly where he wanted it to. She works at some clinic, right? My Aunt Rosa added, looking at Priya but talking about her like she wasn't 15 feet away. Not very glamorous, but I suppose someone has to do it. Bless her. The table went quiet in that specific way. Rooms go quiet right before they decide if they're going to let cruelty pass as humor. Melissa's eyes darted between everyone, unsure whether to laugh along or look uncomfortable. My grandmother kept eating, either not hearing it or choosing not to. I felt my jaw tighten. Not performing, just noticing everything wrong with that sentence and deciding I was done letting it sit there unanswered. She's a nurse practitioner, I said, my voice calm but flat, cutting cleanly through the noise. She runs the pediatric wing at County General. That's not. Someone has to do it. That's one of the hardest jobs in this room, and most of the people at this table wouldn't last a week doing it. Silence. My uncle laughed awkwardly, unsure if I was joking. I wasn't, and my face told him so. I just meant, Rosa started, hand already reaching for damage control. I know what you meant, I said, still calm, still flat. I'm just telling you what it actually is. Priya looked up for the first time all night, not surprised, not grateful in some dramatic way, just quietly relieved, like she hadn't expected anyone to bother correcting the room, and was recalibrating what kind of night this might turn out to be. She held my eyes for exactly 1 second longer than casual, then went back to helping my grandmother with her plate like nothing had happened. After dinner, while my mother orchestrated dessert, and Melissa checked her phone under the table, pretending not to be relieved for an exit, I found myself on the back porch where Priya had escaped to get air. The cold hit different out there, sharp, quiet, a relief after the noise inside. You didn't have to do that, she said, not looking at me, arms crossed against the chill, breath fogging slightly in the porch light. I know, I said. I wanted to. Good unexpected, or exit strategy unexpected? She asked, finally glancing over, one eyebrow raised, testing the shape of the moment before trusting it. Good unexpected, I said. The kind where I've been sitting across from someone for 2 hours, who's memorized her elevator pitch about Portugal, and the actually interesting person in the room got handed a paper plate and a seat near the kitchen. She almost smiled, the corner of her mouth giving in before the rest of her face did. I like paper plates less to wash, efficient really. That's not why they gave it to you. I know why they gave it to me, she said, and there wasn't bitterness in it. Just fact, stated the way you'd mention the weather, flat and unbothered. I've been to enough of these to know my seat at the table before I even walk in the door. I asked about the clinic, mostly to change the air between us into something lighter. She lit up talking about a 6-year-old patient who'd named every one of his stuffed animals after Marvel villains because the heroes were boring and predictable. She told me about the time she'd had to explain to a grown man twice her size why he couldn't skip his tetanus shot by just being careful, and how he'd looked personally betrayed by science. I laughed. Actually laughed, not the polite kind I'd been rationing all evening. What do you do? She asked. Besides apparently defending nurses at family dinners like it's your part-time job. Structural engineer, I said. I make sure buildings don't fall down. Less exciting than Marvel villain names, but it pays the bills, and nobody's ever accused me of being reckless. So you're the reason I can trust bridges, she said, nodding solemnly. Noted. I'll think of you every time I cross one. We talked for almost an hour out there, the cold barely registering anymore. She had opinions, strong ones, about hospital bureaucracy, about how people confuse kindness with weakness, about a landlord who kept forgetting to fix her heater for 3 weeks running. I noticed she never once mentioned looking for someone, never fished for compliments, never performed warmth she didn't feel. She just was who she was, unfiltered, and let the room adjust to her, instead of the other way around. It was the most restful conversation I'd had in 2 years. Later, when we went back inside for dessert, nobody was rushing toward. She said something quieter, almost to herself. You know, my mom used to bring me to things like this too. Growing up, family friends setting her up, everyone commenting on her weight, her job, her prospects, like she was a stock people were deciding whether to invest in. She used to tell me, let them talk. The right person hears you, not them. She paused, looking at the porch railing instead of me. I stopped believing that for a while, started thinking maybe the loud ones were right, and the rest of us just had to accept smaller rooms. I didn't rush to fix it. I just let it sit there, the way it deserved to, giving it the weight it was owed instead of rushing past it, with reassurance she hadn't asked for. She sounds like she was right, though, I said eventually. Priya looked at me for a second longer than she needed to, something shifting behind her expression. Maybe. Before she left that night, I asked for her number, not through my cousin, not through my mother's approval system, not through any of the machinery the family had built around my love life. I don't want this to become my family's win, she said, only half joking, though I could hear the real caution underneath it. If we do anything, it's because we decided, not because your mother set a table, and your uncle made a comparison. Deal, I said. Our terms, our language. Nobody else gets to claim credit for this. 2 weeks later, we met at a used bookstore downtown. Her choice, she said something about wanting neutral ground with good lighting, and no one's aunt commenting on the appetizers. She showed me the medical thriller section like it was a personal shrine, pulling books off shelves with the enthusiasm of someone showing off old photographs. She told me about the time she accidentally recommended a book to a patient's family that turned out to have a main character who died the same way their relative had. Worst afternoon of my professional life, she said, laughing at herself in a way that made me like her more, not less. We stayed 2 hours past when either of us had a reason to. Coffee went cold in cups we'd forgotten about. The bookstore employee started stacking chairs around us, a polite hint neither of us took right away, both of us pretending not to notice until he actually turned off half the lights. 3 months in, we were sitting on her fixed-up porch, new heater installed, new landlord found after she finally filed a complaint I helped her draft, when she said, quiet and unguarded, watching the street instead of me, I used to think I had to make myself smaller to be considered a good option. Like being interesting was a consolation prize for not being what people expected at first glance. You're not a consolation prize, I said, simple, precise, no embellishment, because none was needed. You were just sitting in the wrong room, with the wrong people deciding what mattered before they'd actually met you. She didn't say anything for a moment, just looked at me like she was checking whether I meant it. Then, that was a sentence with history behind it, wasn't it? Maybe, I said, but it's true regardless of where it came from. She leaned her head against my shoulder, and neither of us moved for a long time. Somewhere down the street a dog barked, A light flickered on in a neighbor's window, and none of it mattered more than the quiet settling between us. Accepted, not erased, exactly as it was. My mother still brings up Melissa sometimes, half out of habit, the way people mention old plans they've quietly given up on. But she's stopped setting seats now. Last Sunday, Priya sat next to me at the good end of the table, china plate and all, and my Aunt Rosa refilled her wineglass first, without being asked, without a comment attached to it. Some rooms take longer to catch up than others, but they do, eventually, one quiet correction at a time, one dinner at a time, until the seating chart finally matches what should have been obvious from the start.